It was a headline that made people spit out their morning coffee, a jolt to the system. The kind of news that instantly rewrites the day's agenda. 1 minute, the world is scrolling through cat videos, memes, and the usual digital noise, and the next, there's news flashing across the screen from Niger, a military coup, a sudden shift in power, and a firm demand for French troops to pack up and leave the country. France, a global power with a long history in the region, was being shown the door, quite unceremoniously, by a nation that, let's be honest, many in the West couldn't even accurately pinpoint on a map. The rooster, France's proud symbol, had crowed for decades in West Africa, its influence felt in every corner, but this time, the voice resonating was distinctly Nigerian, clear and strong. It was a declaration of sovereignty, not a polite request for reconsideration. Imagine telling your landlord after years of them staying in your spare room that he has to pack his bags and move out of the guest room he's been using for years, effective immediately. News channels across Europe and America went into overdrive, scrambling to cover the unfolding events, with pundits warning of potential instability in the region and the looming specter of Russian influence. The shock, the concern etched on faces, the subtle panic in the air, it was palpable. But at its heart, this was a sovereign country making a bold decision about its own future, charting its own course on its own terms without external dictates. They took a long, hard look at their own security situation, critically assessing their relationship with a former colonial power that still held considerable sway, and collectively said with a unified voice, "This arrangement simply isn't working for us anymore." This wasn't a decision carefully crafted in the halls of power in Paris or Washington, but rather, a sentiment that had been brewing on the ground, on the bustling streets of Niamey, fueled by a new generation of leaders and citizens who see the world through a different lens. They are seeking genuine partners, built on mutual respect, not patrons dictating terms. They believe their abundant natural resources should be the engine that drives their own future prosperity, not be siphoned off to enrich someone else's coffers. This bold move sent a clear signal to the world. The old way of doing things is definitively over. Sometimes true power lies in the courage to stand your ground and say no to the status quo. The world's immediate reaction, a complex mix of disbelief, apprehension, and thinly veiled fear, ultimately revealed far more about the ingrained biases of the world order than it did about the nation of Niger itself. Because for all the well-intentioned talk and lofty rhetoric surrounding equality and partnership, it seems some are still deeply uncomfortable when an African nation confidently picks up the microphone and boldly speaks for itself, articulating its own vision for its future. The rooster's crow this time served as a powerful wake-up call to the world, and unsurprisingly, not everyone was particularly thrilled to be jolted awake from their comfortable slumber. Why does the world act so shocked, so utterly taken aback? Why the exaggerated surprise when an African nation makes a bold move, charting its own course? For centuries, Africa was portrayed often through a distorted lens, as perpetually needing saving or constant managing by outside forces. So when a nation stands up, with unwavering resolve and says, "Thanks, but we've got the keys, we're taking control," it messes with the whole story, disrupting the preconceived narrative. Global powers are used to and quite comfortable with setting the agenda, dictating the terms, defining the problems, often with a self-serving bias, and offering the solutions conveniently packaged to their benefit. When an African country builds a dam, a symbol of progress and self-reliance, with its own engineers and non-Western funding, forging its own partnerships, it's not just infrastructure, it's disruption, a challenge to the established order. The language shifts, the framing changes. Europe's tough choices are strategic, carefully considered and justified, while Africa's are automatically labeled risky, inherently unstable. The narrative of a dependent Africa, reliant on handouts and external guidance, is comfortable for the old order, reinforcing existing power structures. An assertive Africa complicates things. It demands to be heard, to be respected, new competitors, challenging established monopolies, new voices, offering fresh perspectives and innovative solutions, a new balance of power, a recalibration of global influence. The surprise isn't about the action itself, the specific policy or project, but the audacity, the sheer nerve of taking control. The world isn't just surprised by Africa's choices, it's more than that. It's surprised it has to listen, that it can no longer dictate the conversation. It's like realizing the intern, once overlooked and underestimated, is actually the new CEO calling the shots. The surprise party is over. Africa is running the meeting, setting the agenda, leading the discussions. The old seating arrangement is gone, the established hierarchy overturned, and the world is scrambling for a new seat, a new position in this evolving landscape. This is the new reality, a world where Africa's voice is not just heard, but heeded. Let's talk about Nigeria. For decades, Hollywood ruled global film. Then, Nollywood was born. No permission, no waiting for Western grants. Low-budget, straight-to-video films told Nigerian stories for Nigerians. At first, the world didn't notice. Then, Nollywood became the world's second-largest film industry by volume. Nigerian films spread across Africa and the diaspora. Suddenly, Netflix wanted in, making multi-million-dollar deals for Nigerian content. The world shifted from ignoring to investing. Nollywood's power came from authenticity. It told African stories with an African voice. It proved you don't need to imitate the West to succeed globally. This wasn't government-led, it was pure entrepreneurship. Nigeria started exporting culture, fashion, music, and slang through film. The cycle: first ignorance, then curiosity, then partnership. Nollywood forced the world to see Nigeria as a creative and economic powerhouse. It was a declaration of cultural independence that paid off. Nollywood didn't wait for a seat at the table. It built its own, and now everyone wants in. Now let's fly to Kenya. The world saw Africa as a climate victim needing Western help. Kenya wrote a different story, becoming a leader in geothermal and renewable energy. It bet big on its own resources, especially the geothermal power beneath the Great Rift Valley. Skeptics doubted the cost and ambition, but Kenya pushed forward. Projects like Olkaria turned volcanic steam into electricity for millions. Today, Kenya gets most of its energy from renewables, ahead of many wealthy nations. Kenya didn't just join the green revolution, it led it. Now global leaders look to Kenya for climate solutions. This wasn't just about electricity, it was about self-reliance and vision. Kenya's green boom shattered the myth of Africa as a passive recipient of aid. The world's reaction shifted from skepticism to admiration. By choosing its own path, Kenya built a new kind of power, the power of a pioneer. To understand the world's reaction to Africa's independence, we need a quick history lesson. Colonialism meant Europe drew Africa's borders, treating the continent like a child under strict parental control. Even after independence, the parents left behind house rules, economic and cultural influence lingered. Neocolonialism kept African economies tied to exporting raw materials for the benefit of former colonizers. So when a country like Mali or Burkina Faso changes its language or security partners, it's a direct challenge to a century-old power structure. For the former parents, it feels like losing control. The idea of Africa as a continent of sovereign equals is still new. The world is adjusting and Africa is stepping into adulthood, drama included. The international media shapes the story, deciding who gets to speak and what the world hears. For years, Africa's story was war, poverty, and crisis. If a lion ate a tourist, it was news. If a country built a university, silence. This framing reinforced old power dynamics. When African nations make independent choices, the media often shifts to stories of instability and chaos. Leaders once praised become unpredictable strongmen. Choices are rarely presented as rational, sovereign decisions. Instead, it's often framed as manipulation by Russia or China. This portrayal shapes public opinion and foreign policy, justifying intervention and control. But now, African media, citizen journalists, and social media are challenging the narrative. Africans are telling their own stories, showing innovation and progress. They're grabbing the microphone back, explaining their choices. The battle for the narrative is on, and it's crucial for true independence. Why should this matter to you scrolling on your phone? These reactions to Africa's independence are a mirror. They reveal the rules that still govern the world. When African nations process their own resources, it changes global supply chains, affecting your phone, your chocolate, your coffee. An assertive Africa means new economic powerhouses and more competition. Your future job might depend on collaborating with a new African giant. It's also about fairness and justice. Whether a continent of over 1 billion people has the right to self-determination isn't abstract. It's about dismantling colonial mindsets. When you see shock or condescension at African choices, you're witnessing prejudice. Recognizing and challenging it is part of building a more equitable world. Africa's rising independence is a story of resilience and innovation. It shows that real change starts with the courage to do things differently. Your voice matters, question the old rules, and help build a fairer world. Imagine the world as a giant playlist, a constantly evolving mix of sounds and rhythms. For a long time, this playlist has been curated by a few Western DJs, setting the tone and controlling the flow. But now, imagine Africa grabbing the aux cord, ready to share its unique sounds and perspectives. It might seem small, but one decision made in an African capital can ripple through boardrooms in Tokyo, impacting global markets and strategies. Brussels and Washington, forcing leaders to reassess their approaches. When Sahel nations ended military deals with France, asserting their sovereignty, it forced NATO and the EU to rethink their strategies, adapt to the changing landscape, and consider new partnerships. New players like Russia and Turkey stepped in, filling the void and forging new alliances. The old map of alliances was obsolete, a relic of a bygone era. The playlist changed, reflecting a new world order, and everyone had to learn the new dance, adapting to the shifting rhythms of global politics. Economically, the African Continental Free Trade Area signaled a shift toward intra-African trade, fostering economic independence and growth. Now, global powers must engage with a unified economic force, recognizing Africa's growing influence on the world stage. This single choice is reshaping trade routes and investment strategies, creating new opportunities and challenges for all. Every time an African nation finances its own infrastructure, building a foundation for future prosperity, or dictates its own policy, charting its own course, it proves the world is multipolar, a diverse and interconnected network of nations. Influence and innovation can come from anywhere, challenging traditional power structures. This unsettles those used to being in charge, clinging to outdated models of control, but it makes the world more dynamic, vibrant, and full of potential. One choice, one ripple, can change the entire ocean, transforming the global landscape. Africa is no longer just in the water. It's making the waves, shaping the future of our world. We've seen the headlines, the history, and the ripples. African nations are making choices that reshape their destiny and the world's. The old narrative of need is being replaced by one of self-determination and ambition. The era of asking for permission is over. The world's shock reveals anxiety about a changing order. Africa is no longer a problem to be solved, but a continent of 1.4 billion people, brimming with ideas and energy. This is the curriculum for the 21st century. Power isn't permanent, and narratives can be reclaimed. Watching Africa find its voice is watching history in real time. The question now, is Africa's voice so powerful because it's new, or because, for the first time, the world has no choice but to listen?